All right, welcome back. We're going to do a little bit more multiple choice again together as we try to get ready for the next midterm and our final exam. And I know you're already aware of this, but I'll repeat it anyway. Multiple choice is 50% of our evaluation. So and now that we have something to build questions around together, it's very important for us to look at that process. So let's look at this question, number 26 here. It says a logical conclusion based on the source, the above sources is. And being that there's a whole lot going on in these above sources, I may want to take a look at the four options. And what I may want to do is I may want to apply each one individually, because these options aren't simple, they're quite long, the stems are quite long, the answers are quite long. So I may want to apply them individually to see which one's correct. So America's large ecological footprint, pause. I definitely see that here, right? And I definitely see that there. So far, that could be a conclusion based on the above sources. Definitely evidence right here and here. May be a source of division in international relations. Well, when we zoom in here a little bit, we can see that the EU, Japan, and other countries look upset about America's actions, and they look upset about America's size of their footprint. So we can definitely see some pull to that answer. And up here, it also shows Japan, the EU, and China, and Russia, and their relative footprints. And we could make the conclusion that in a world of finite resources, in a world where the externality of externality of mankind's economic activities has had an ecological effect, we could definitely see some pull to A. So I'm thinking it's A, but I'm going to explore B, C, and D. Once other nations adopt the American standard, the world will be more sustainable. While the world would be less sustainable if these nations' feet became this big. If all of these nations had feet this size, the perspective of this cartoonist, they're using satire or humor to show just how monsterful this foot size is and how destructive it is. So it's actually suggesting the opposite of that. America needs to be the pioneer in sustainable prosperity patterns for the future. Definitely there's an argument that we could make that America needs to be a pioneer because of the size of their economy, and if America doesn't do it, then it's unlikely that it will work. But that ignores what's happening here, whereas A didn't ignore what's happening here. So being that A deals with this, then A is probably a better answer than C. One nation's ecological footprint has no impact on another's. Well, we can't make that assumption. It certainly looks like this footprint has a huge impact. So that's probably one of the weaker answers. So if I'm caught between A and C, as we're often in social studies caught between two, then I would suggest to you that the detail here, this nuance within the source here, gives me a pull to this one and makes C the distractor, not the right answer. All right, let's look at number 27. A good title for this source. So we have a source, and it's suggesting what would be a good title for it. So we have to look at all of these things within the source and say, okay, does it relate to this? Does it relate to that, this or that? Which one does it relate to the best? So what is the source? What's made with oil? We have sunglasses, computers, fertilizers, oil, and gas for your car. Obviously, the roads we drive on are made from oil. Millions of chemicals, crayons, toys, all synthetic. Clothing, insulation for your house is made from oil. Surprising amount of your food contains oil. Most food packaging contains oil. Cosmetics, shoes, telephones, all things plastic. The ink in this poster. So again, that's a reminder that it's very simple when people say, oh man, let's just stop using oil. That's not possible right now. We are addicted. It is the lifeblood, right? So what's made of oil? It looks like everything's made out of oil. So the message here is that everything's made out of oil, and we are maybe just past peak oil. And they're suggesting some alternatives like solar, wind, hydro, and they're saying that these might be too expensive right now to be viable. So a good title for this source would be, so what is this source about? Can we replace oil in time? Well, there's definitely this idea that we're running out and we use it for a lot of things. That might be a maybe. Is the age of oil coming to an end? Probably should just say, is the age of oil coming to an end? And that's definitely expressed here, but it's kind of ignoring some of these other factors. Oil, the lifeblood of our modern economy. We've heard that phrase a lot, and we definitely see a lot of answers to that it is the lifeblood up here. But does C address this part of the source? So it should be dealing with all of the source, right? We must replace oil, how and why it will happen. So we must replace oil, and these are our options. So if we're trying to get a title, and the title needs to be dealing with all of the nuances of the source, some of these possible titles deal with parts of the source. Can we replace oil in time deals with this part, but not this part. Oil, the lifeblood of our modern economy, deals with this part of the source, but not this part of the source. So we're going to eliminate those two. Although great titles doesn't really talk about everything within the source. Is the age of oil coming to an end? That's definitely answered here. And this is definitely establishing, hey, we're living in an age of oil, but we're coming to an end of it. We must replace oil, how and why it will happen. We must replace oil because it's running out, and these are the hows it might happen. So, we're kind of stuck with well, which one's better? Is it we must replace oil, how and why it will happen, or can we replace oil in time? Does this answer how and why? Maybe answers the how, why it will happen. Can we replace oil in time, or we must replace oil, how and why will it happen? And does this show that oil has been replaced? Is there enough collective energy here to replace how much energy we have here? This looks a lot taller than this. You know, the peak here is higher than the peak here. So even combined, I'm looking at this source, and it's suggesting to me that maybe we cannot replace oil. So I might pick an A, and this might be one that I go with a question mark, and I might come back to. So question marks are ones where at the end of the exam, these are the 4 or 5 or 10 that I'll come back and take a second look on. Here's a longer source, and we have 4 speakers, and I don't want to be reading each speaker multiple times. So I want to make sure I understand what questions I'm looking for. There's only 2 of them here. On the opinion spectrum below, the correct order of the speaker's opinions from left to right is. So while I read them, I should be labeling them. You know, is this person a global free market, somebody that believes the free market is incompatible with sustainable prosperity? So they don't like the free market, they don't like capitalism. Or do they believe a global free market is the only path to sustainability? So I'm putting the 4 of these on a spectrum and saying who's most in favor of the free market and who's most against, and then in between. And looking at the possibilities, unfortunately, the person who made the test, and I made this question, they have, 1, 2, 3, and 4, so all 4 possibilities are here, but we know for sure one's not in the extreme right position. One's not one of the options here. We've got 1 here twice. We don't have a 3 here. So 3 isn't just moderate right, it's either extreme right or it's over here somewhere, and 1's definitely one of these 3 positions. But other than that, we don't really know a whole lot. It'd make it easy for us if we could just figure out who's most extreme left. So, taking a peek, we want to see where they're at on the spectrum. Who says that global free market's bad? Put them over here. Global free market's good. Today's global economy is creating wealth, but this wealth is not being distributed fairly. I can already say this one's not saying free market's good because they're pointing out disparity, right? And that's why speaker one's not one of these options. The poor are benefiting a little from globalization. The rich are benefiting a lot. Global capitalism needs to be regulated so that the gap between rich and poor is narrowed significantly. Only then will it result in prosperity and fairness for all people. Globalization's ecological impact is mostly negative. Mostly, not completely, so I'm not sure it's extreme. But the emergence of a global environmental, non-governmental organization such as Greenpeace is a positive trend. It should be encouraged. So definitely doesn't like capitalism. Not sure if it's an extreme position. We're going to have to read a couple more to see where it is relative to them. Economic globalization has reached the point where its advantages now slightly outweigh its disadvantages. Economic globalization has reached the point where its advantages slightly outweigh its disadvantages. This first sentence makes me think that two might be here. One cannot deny that globalization still harms some ecosystems and some individuals, but significant progress is occurring simultaneously on another economic and ecological fronts. Globalization is taking baby steps towards sustainable prosperity. There will undoubtedly be a few fails or falls along the way, but it is slowly heading in the right direction. So this person's still positive about the global marketplace. They see some faults, so they're probably not extremely in favor of the free market. I'm going to say two's probably here, making D my answer. So if, and I thought one was further to the left than two, so if three is an extreme right position, chances are D's my answer. So if three, because I'm paying attention down here, if three is like, ah man, global marketplace is great, then that's the answer. Globalization enables societies to advance economically in ways that are environmentally beneficial. When countries become wealthy, they can afford to better protect the environment. So this person's suggesting that if we want to protect the environment, we need capitalism. We need wealth. And capitalism is not the destroyer of environment, it's the solution. That only once you have wealth can you protect the environment. So yeah, this is definitely going to be over here. Poor countries lack the resources to enforce environmental laws and repair environmental damage. Trade liberalization is our last chance to eradicate global poverty and save Mother Earth. This last sentence is an extreme sentence saying, man, I love free trade. So because that's here, because that one's here, because that one was to the left, we're assuming that 4 is going to be an extreme left position. Might as well read it. Global capitalism is the root cause of poverty and environmental damage in today's world. Sounds like they hate capitalism. Definitely D. So I took some time. You know, that's the key message I'm giving you guys. It takes time. I took some time, I read through the question, and as I read through the question, I tried to label them, knowing what the question was asking me to do. I tried to label them on the spectrum. I know that sometimes when questions take time, we might just say, you know what, I'm going to skip it. If we only have 25 questions on the test, skip one question, that's 4% of your mark. So, you can't be skipping questions. Speaker 1 expresses support for something. So 1's over here. Speaker 1 is to the left of center. Speaker 1 was the one that sees some issues. So, expresses support for unrestricted economic freedom. No. That would be Speaker 3, so we can get rid of that. Trade protectionism. So we have to have tariffs and stuff like that. I don't remember seeing that. Trade unionism. Social justice. Going back in here, can we see anything about disparity? Oh yes, this one was the one about rich and poor, and haves and have-nots, and the need to address social inequality and economic inequality. So the answer is A. Next up, we have this cartoon of the Statue of Liberty, a symbol of America, the personification of America, and she's addicted to oil, right? Literally addicted to oil. America is addicted to oil, George W. Bush. So the President of the United States even was aware of that. And here you have the United States, she doesn't look too free anymore. She's injecting oil into her, bloodstream like a drug addict would. And because of that, it's Iraqi oil she's injecting, not any oil. And there's been 100 deaths of UK soldiers and 2,245 Americans, and an incalculable number of Iraqis. Who knows? It could be 1 million. You can see how there's more spots there, so it's definitely a bigger number. And the price of a fix keeps going up. So what's the price of her fix? Deaths, right? That's the ideological perspective here. There's an environmental price in the background, the burning oil fields, but there's also a human cost here too. So the ideological perspective of this cartoonist, does it reflect globalization as a means to acquire what we need? Well, yeah, she definitely, through globalization, has provided the things she needs, so it is a means, but because of the way America is drawn, it's not saying, hey, globalization's great, now she can get her fix. It's like, man, this is a bad situation. So although it is showing that America, through globalization, goes to war in Iraq, gets Iraqi oil, they get the things they need, it's not celebrating that. And because it's not celebrating it, it's not A. Reflects globalization due to our interdependence. So globalization is good because we're all interdependent. It seems to be missing the tone. This seems to be negative, right? So I'm not sure it's going to be reflecting. Rejects globalization as a means to create wealth. Well, I don't know how wealthy this statue is. She seems to be having some issues. Rejects globalization to the nature of man, due to the nature of man. So mankind is flawed. We have an addictive personality. Because of that, we go to war to take things that are not ours. It's more about the nature of man, our characteristics, than it is about wealth, creation of wealth. It's not really about the creation of wealth. It's more about the taking of wealth. And why would you reject something for a positive thing? Typically, the creation of wealth is seen as a positive thing. So why would we be rejecting globalization because, hey, it makes money? No, we'd be rejecting globalization because of its theft of wealth, maybe we would take for C, but because it says creation of wealth, and that's a positive thing, that just doesn't fit with this tone. But the idea that this character is flawed, and therefore globalization's flawed, that's the message here. So once again, often there's just sources that you have to slowly break down the nuances of them. The same skills we do for A1 are often the skills you need. So if you're doing well in A1, then a matter of time, you'll do well in multiple choice. You just need more practice. Sometimes, though, there are questions that are more recall-based. This is a recall question that straight up it's just going to describe one of these things, and you need to know which one. Established agency of the UN, 1945, headquarters Washington, maintains a pool of money from which member nations can draw. It purchases foreign currency, stabilizes exchange rates, yada, yada, yada. We get to the end and we're like, well, I know it's the IMF or World Bank, but which one? The only way to get it right is to have studied that part. All right, I'm going to pause, or I'm going to end this because the phone's going.